Vambora. Só ver um bagulho. Aqui, o chat. Será que eu não tenho. Pera aí. Aqui. Meu Deus, pera aí que tá por cima de tudo. Pronto. Queria deixar chat transparente. Só deixa eu tirar a foto, né? Calma que eu tô ao contrário. Calma que eu tô ao contrário. Tem legenda? Não. Perdão, 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 perdão. Perdão.
Or something just about the atmosphere.
Deixa eu voltar.
Minecraft has always had the potential for an unsettling atmosphere, but I think this effect was most pronounced in older versions of the game. I'm in my beta world right now, and I'd be lying if I said there weren't a few times when I was just playing this game late at night, you know, playing for hours alone in the dark, and suddenly this game, which is normally just kind of happy and fun, just gets this weird, unsettling atmosphere. There's something off. For some reason, us humans, when we're alone, we start to feel like we're being watched, like there's something else with us out there somewhere. And you get this weird feeling of paranoia. And I don't know if it's the lighting in these...
Pera aí, chat, que eu vou pegar uma coisa pra tomar só, rapidão. Deixa eu... Bem rápido. Então eu já tava sofrendo ali.
versions.
Continuando.
Something just about the atmosphere. Something about just the way it is. But I have to admit there is something kind of creepy about these versions. Especially because they kind of feel maybe not abandoned, but sort of left behind. I mean, there's only a few people left to play these versions. Most people are obviously going to play the modern versions, which is understandable. So when you come back to these, it's a bit like visiting like an old, dilapidated building sometimes. Since it is close to Halloween time, I figured it would be fun to just kind of talk about weird, old, creepy stuff in early versions of the game. This is mostly just going to be a sort of sit around the campfire and talk video. I'll touch on, you know, the more well-known things like Herobrine, talk about those a bit, but I also want to talk about some things that maybe aren't as well-known. Not that they're secrets, but hopefully if you watch this video, you'll learn something you didn't know before. To start off with, might as well hit close to home. Like I said, I'm in my beta world right now. This isn't going to be a world update. Well, there'll be kind of like a mini one at the end, I guess, but I did want to come here to talk about things I've found in my own world that are kind of strange, and when I found them, they just sort of, they gave me that ominous feeling. I'm down here in this spider dungeon. I found this a little while back, and I actually talked about this briefly in another video, but I'll mention it again for those who haven't seen it. And this dungeon is mostly untouched. I did mine out the mossy cobble in the floor, but I didn't do this. For some reason in the wall of this dungeon, there's like a perfect doorway or archway here that just leads to nothing. And I am 99%...
Essa porra dessas paredes aí que aparecia nessa versão é... Tipo, de tu aparecia mesmo, achei que era tipo... Quando os caras queriam fazer aqueles vídeos de terror, eles faziam. Achei que era tipo... Não achei que era de true, cara.
Sure,
Que
dungeons don't
tenebroso.
spawn like this. The openings to a dungeon is a cave. So when I looked over and... oh, it's actually raining. That's perfect. When I looked over, when I got down here and saw this just sort of ominous archway, that was kind of creepy. That was creepy. It feels like someone made this entryway and then sealed it off, and there's something bad behind there. I can just feel it in my bones. So that was the spider dungeon. That was one of the things that was kind of weird. I think that's the lesser of the two things. That one's not that weird. It just, to me...
Cara... Uma coisa que dá medo, uma versão que dá medo é... A versão Legacy console, dos consoles tipo Xbox 360, PS3. As vibes delas são tenebrosas, cara. Jogar sozinho é um terror. Igual a beta do Mine.
It felt kind of creepy. This next one I think is a little bit more crazy. It's just right in this area. I had lived here for a long time, but for some reason I just never walked over here. But if you do walk over here next to this weird hill, there's this.
No.
And this is just like a slit, like this dark, perfect tunnel going into the hill. And when you go into it,
Que porra é essa?
it is a perfect 2x2 tunnel in here. So this just, I don't know, this like made my heart sink when I first found this. There was very, like, logically I know this is just some weird terrain generation, maybe a weird like stunted cave, but it is very odd and kind of creepy and I don't like it. Because if you remember from like the old Herobrine lore, one of the things that he would put in your world is 2x2 tunnels.
Cara, foda isso que a... Cara, a geração de mundo dessas versões é tipo simplesmente uma bosta. Tipo... Eu jurava isso.
And this is like
Só que é medonho.
2x2 tunnel, which is very weird, and yeah.
Tipo, pode girar naturalmente, não é nada. Sim, mas um bagulho tão player de se fazer. Tipo, encontrar isso jogando single player sem nunca ter feito isso é um absurdo, cara. tá ligado? É medonho.
But those are the two things that I've found in my world, personally. And when you see stuff like this, it's very easy to imagine how things like Herobrine came about. I mean, if you're just in this version, and you know, there's no villages, the world is very kind of lonely. The only structure that generates is a dungeon. And when you feel alone, and you know, the other things I talked about, the atmosphere, and all that stuff is kind of coming down on you, and that feeling of quiet and loneliness is really setting in. And then you find something like that. It honestly makes sense how all these sort of urban legends and weird creepypastas came about. And I'm actually curious. Let me know, did you guys believe in Herobrine as kids? Because I genuinely don't remember if I believed in Herobrine as a kid. I think I was kind of undecided.
Cara, eu meio que acreditava e não acreditava. Eu meio que acreditava e não acreditava, tá ligado? Tipo... tipo, sei lá. Eu achava que o Herobrine existia nas versões antigas. Na nova ele não existia. Só que eu tinha uma pitadinha de... Caralho, será que ele não existe nas versões novas também?
But part of me definitely wanted it to be real. For some reason, just... there is something fascinating, and I think this is true for a lot of people. There's something just sort of fascinating about, like, creepy stuff and mysterious stuff. And that's exactly, like, the itch that Herobrine and all that sort of stuff scratched for me. I loved all that sort of stuff when I was a dumb kid. And part of that dumb kid is still, you know, living on inside of me, so I still kind of love it. I remember I used to... no, I only did this once, actually. I made a world expressly for the purpose of finding Herobrine. Like, I made this world and then set out to find Herobrine. And I set the fog all the way to the bottom, and I just wandered around. And what I did is I took screenshots, and then like I went back and reviewed the screenshots later. Like, I thought, you know, Herobrine was gonna pop up in the corner of them, because that's what Herobrine always does, right? He's always just like in the corner of some screenshot, you know, like kind of blurry probably. And I remember I ended up getting so scared that I actually scared myself, and I started building like crucifixes around the world so that I could ward off Herobrine, and eventually I just deleted the world because I got so freaked out. But that's like perfect. That's such a kid, that's such a young Minecraft fan thing to do, is to like set out to find Herobrine, or try to like make a movie about Herobrine or something invading our world. But honestly, what I find even more interesting than Herobrine now is sort of what came before Herobrine. You have the White Eyes sort of urban legend, and if you didn't know, White Eyes is sort of this thing that inspired Herobrine. It was this thing that was getting passed around like the Minecraft forums and stuff early on, about like, oh, I was caving and I saw these two white eyes.
Nossa, essa é tenebrosa.
You know, that sort of
Essa é
thing.
mais tenebrosa.
And that, of course, kind of turned into Herobrine, I guess, eventually, because, of course, Herobrine, his main feature, he has white eyes. But what's really interesting to me about that is that it was kind of not well known. I mean, I didn't know about it until, I think, last year. A bunch of people kind of found it out and started collecting, like, sort of archiving information about White Eyes and the White Eyes urban legend. Herobrine was well known for a long time, but White Eyes kind of drifted into obscurity. And I'm not an expert on this White Eyes myth at all. I just kind of know about it. But before that, even before either of those sort of creepypasta urban legend things, there was the stuff that's actually in the game, and that interests me more because Herobrine is something that was kind of made by fans, But what's interesting to me is stuff like the cave sounds or disc 13, because those are things that were deliberately put in the game, you know, by the developers.
Cara, isso é uma brisa. Tipo, porque os caras botaram. E o pior, homem, o pior é que esse som de caverna, eles, tipo, se tu olhar o espectrograma, eles fazem, mano. Coisa tipo do bagulho de Herobrine, tipo. Isso é um bagulho que assim, não foi, tipo. Porque teoricamente o Herobrine é fan-made, né? Tipo assim, teoricamente. Herobrine foi um bagulho que a comunidade criou. Tipo, não tinha nenhum indício de Herobrine no jogo e do nada os caras foram lá e paf. Mas ó, simplesmente os caras adicionaram a porra de sons. Vai. Tá ligado? Um bagulho assim no meio do nada, só pra dar um cagaço num jogo que não era pra ser terror. E se tu olhar o espectrograma é tipo Herobrine. E tipo, não é um bagulho que a comunidade falou, ó, tem esse som aqui, mas o som nunca acontece. Tipo, os caras criaram o som. Tipo, tá no jogo, o bagulho tá no jogo. Qualquer um pode ir lá olhar.
By Notch, C418, whoever, which that's really interesting to me. First, because I think it might have been kind of an acknowledgement, even back then, that there was something, a potential for creepiness in this silly block game, and also maybe it may have been a sort of just attempt to scare players. I don't know if Notch was just wanted to mess with players by adding that stuff in. What's really interesting about the cave sounds is, when you think about it, I mean, okay, imagine you're going to make cave sounds for a game. What would you make naturally? Like, what would your mind go to first? Probably like water dripping, right? Or rocks or pebbles falling, something like that, right? Just like natural noises. But no, specifically for Minecraft, we have like hellish demon ghost noises. Like, none of them are just like natural, like, oh, water dripping. They're all like really scary noises. And I kind of love that. Like I said, I loved creepy stuff, and I still love the cave noises. I love that they went in that direction of just scary instead of kind of just normal. But adding on to the cave sounds, we also have disc 13 and 11. Disc 13 came first, and again, this was something before Herobrine. So people like to connect the two things, you know, like the...
Cara, isso não faz sentido, homem. Como que o disco que emite sons capetúcios foi antes do Herobrine? Tipo, os caras, o Notch pensou, vou fazer um disco com sons do demônio.
The cave sound.
Por quê?
Disc 13. Even disc 11, technically the file was added, I think, before the Herobrine myth. I'm actually not sure, though. Don't quote me on that. C418 actually has a little...
Deixa eu fazer um teste aqui. Calma aí, chat. Deixa eu ver um bagulho aqui rapidão. Um segundo. Calma aí. Deixa eu voltar lá.
Sort of page on his website about Minecraft Volume Alpha, the album, and there's a little excerpt on disc 13, or I guess the song's just called 13, where he talks about how he imagined it would be played in a cave, like on a jukebox, and like the player would go into the cave and hear this creepy music, and then just find out it's just a jukebox playing creepy music. I thought that was kind of like a fun idea of just messing with the player, because that would be extremely scary. If you were just playing the game and you heard 13 playing in a cave, I would quit immediately. But yeah, that was really interesting to kind of hear how he imagined it being used way back when it was added in the game.
O 11 que é o que
The really cool thing about disc 13 and 11, especially 11, I think people like to theorize. They think there's some sort of story behind it. And a lot of the theories, I feel like, It's just like, it's kind of, most of the theories are just kind of a shot in the dark, I feel. I don't think they have very much to back them up. But interestingly, there is one theory which I really like, and I think is probably actually correct. It's this theory that basically Disc 11 and Disc 13 go together. Like they sort of just
Ficava de noite do nada.
fit together and make one continuous story, which is really interesting to me. I like this theory a lot because there's actually a gap in Disc 13. If you listen to it, there's sort of a stop in the music where there's just sort of silence for a little bit. And the theory goes that Disc 11 is placed in the middle of that gap. And then when Disc 11 ends, you play the rest of Disc 13 and it tells a sort of cohesive story. You may have heard this theory, and I'm gonna guess you've heard it from Game Theory because they did a video on this. But the really frustrating thing about that is they did not come up with this theory. This theory was made by a Reddit user. It was a Reddit post originally from a user named Dirt Piper, I believe. And it's this long, awesome Reddit post. He talks about everything basically that he got from listening to the 2 tracks. And I'll link that. I'll try to link everything I talk about in this video. But yeah, it's very interesting read. And it sucks because he is, as far as I know, he is the one who came up with that theory. And then probably most people, if they know it, will attribute it to Game Theory because they made a video on it, I think like 4 or 5 years later. So it's definitely like, Dirt Piper definitely came up with the theory. He did not steal it from Game Theory. Another thing I wanted to talk about is old Minecraft ARGs. Now these aren't actually like old videos, but they're based around usually older Minecraft versions. And there's quite a few of them. And overall, I find the concept really interesting. Some of them are kind of hit or miss. My problem that I tend to have is they're either too crazy, like it's just too in your face, like rah, or it's just nothing, like there's just nothing happens. Like someone just records some footage of an old Minecraft version, turns the fog up, and they say, "Ooh, spooky," but they didn't actually add anything to it. There's 2 in particular that I can remember off the top of my head, and that for me are really memorable and interesting. There's one called, I think it's called Minecraft Alpha something versions, and probably a lot of you already know about this one. It's basically the one where they have these kind of, they act like there's these sort of different versions that were put in the game during alpha, and only a select group of people were allowed to test them. And it's honestly a very interesting and unique concept. I really appreciate that. The videos have a really good atmosphere and are kind of creepy, especially the earlier ones. My only problem with it is that it kind of gets a little too crazy.
Eu tinha visto, eu vi vídeo sobre isso. Não,
acho
que não foi
too insane, and there's like portals and doors everywhere, and that's actually not a criticism of it. It's just that's the type of videos they're trying to make. To be honest, I didn't watch all of them. I kind of just watched the early ones, and from what I remember, I was a little disappointed just because I thought this was going to be something creepy, and it is kind of creepy and weird, but it's mostly just trying to be weird, like this story of this unknown version. And yeah, I appreciate it for what it is. But there's actually another channel that I like a lot, and I think it does that creepy old Minecraft ARG perfectly. It's called Old Minecraft Re-Uploads, and I just love this. I'm not going to talk about every video that they have. I will talk about 2 that I like the most. I think the first one, if I remember correctly, it's the first one, where it's sort of this house tour. And the guy's going through this house, and it's just kind of quiet and, you know, not too much happening, just a normal old video. And then suddenly in the middle of the video, there's just this moment where the screen cuts to black, and the health bar has like 1/2 a heart left. And it's just there for like a second, and then it goes back. I think that's pretty simple. Some people might say that's like too cliche and simple. I actually really like it because it's really weird. And then my favorite part of this video is he's showing off sort of his basement or his mine or something. And he starts walking down these stairs, and you start to hear what sounds like another player walking towards us from somewhere. And as he turns this corner, you just see a glimpse, just a very small glimpse of what looks like another player's skin, and then the video cuts out. I love that. I think that's perfect. Perfect. That's so creepy. It's so, it's just enough, you know, it's not like over the top in your face, but it's also not too subtle.
Tá. Eu acho que... Oh, peraí. Deixa eu ver. Oh, eu vou... Vamos continuar outro dia. Vamos pro Fasmofobia, acho que já tá bom. Metadezinha do vídeo. O vídeo é muito bem compridinho. Já terminei de comer. Já não precisa mais ver tanto. Enfim, deixa eu...